FBI Director Raj Patel stood frozen at the witness table, his normally composed face suddenly pale. Across from him, Congresswoman Sarah Crockett held up a manila folder, her eyes locked on his. "Director Patel, I have documents here that directly contradict your sworn testimony," she announced, her voice cutting through the silence of the hearing room. The crowd gasped as cameras zoomed in on Patel's stunned expression. Just moments ago, he had confidently assured the Congressional Committee that all relevant materials were turned over to Congress months ago. Now, Crockett was about to turn his world upside down with evidence nobody knew existed. The FBI director's hands gripped the edge of the table as Crockett prepared to reveal what was inside that folder. Information that could shatter the Bureau's reputation and end his distinguished career in disgrace. Before we dive deeper into this shocking confrontation, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel so you never miss the latest political bombshells and power struggles happening in Washington. FBI Director Raj Patel was the model of what an FBI leader should be, at least on paper. Appointed 3 years ago with overwhelming bipartisan support, the 58-year-old former federal prosecutor had built a reputation as a straight shooter who followed the rules. With his perfectly pressed suits and calm, measured speech, Patel projected authority and trustworthiness to the American public. Director Patel has restored integrity to the Bureau, the president had declared at his swearing-in ceremony. Newspapers praised his by-the-book approach and commitment to transparency. His quarterly testimonies before Congress had become almost routine, respectful exchanges where he would assure lawmakers that the FBI was working diligently to protect America from all threats, foreign and domestic. But behind his polished exterior, rumors had circulated for months among Washington insiders. Whispers about classified operations being hidden from oversight committees. Suggestions that Patel's FBI was selectively enforcing laws depending on political considerations. Still, without evidence, these remained just rumors. Until today. Sitting across from him, Congresswoman Sarah Crockett was everything Patel was not. At 42, the former prosecutor from Texas had entered Congress just 2 years ago, but had quickly established herself as someone who did her homework and came prepared. While other representatives used hearings for political grandstanding, Crockett was known for her methodical questioning and laser focus on facts. "She's like a bloodhound when she thinks someone's hiding something," a colleague had once remarked. "Once she gets the scent, she won't stop until she finds the truth." For months, Crockett had been investigating reports from whistleblowers inside the Bureau who claimed that Patel was burying evidence of serious misconduct. Working late nights in her office, she had meticulously connected dots, interviewed sources, and followed paper trails that others had missed. Despite increasing pressure and warnings to focus on more important issues, she had refused to back down. The American people deserve to know if those at the highest levels of law enforcement are following the same laws they enforce, she had told her staff just yesterday. No one is above accountability, especially not the FBI director. The stakes couldn't be higher. If the documents Crockett held were legitimate, they could reveal that the nation's top law enforcement agency had deliberately misled Congress, a federal crime. For Patel, it could mean the end of his career and possibly criminal charges. For the administration that had appointed him, it would trigger a crisis of confidence. And for the American public, it would raise profound questions about who they could trust to uphold the law. In the packed hearing room, journalists leaned forward in their seats, sensing that this wouldn't be another forgettable congressional hearing. Something big was about to happen. The tension in the air was palpable as Crockett prepared to speak again, the mysterious folder still clutched in her hand. "Director Patel," Crockett began, her Texas accent more pronounced as she leaned toward the microphone, "I'd like to direct your attention to your testimony from March 15th of this year." She nodded to an aide who displayed the transcript on the large screen behind her. "You stated under oath that all surveillance operations conducted by the Bureau between 2022 and 2024 were properly authorized by FISA courts or appropriate judicial warrants. Is that still your testimony today?" Patel nodded confidently. "Yes, Congresswoman, that is correct." "And you further testified that all such operations were fully documented according to FBI protocols and that those documents were provided to this committee, correct?" "That's correct," Patel replied, his voice steady but his eyes now fixed on the folder in her hands. Crockett let the silence hang for a moment before continuing. Then perhaps you can explain why my office received these documents last week. She held up the folder. Documents that detail at least 17 separate surveillance operations that were never disclosed to this committee or, apparently, to any court. Murmurs spread through the hearing room. Patel's deputy, seated behind him, shifted uncomfortably in her chair. "Congresswoman, I'm not familiar with what you're referring to," Patel said, his voice still calm but a slight tremor now visible in his hand as he reached for his water glass. "Without seeing those documents, I can't comment on their authenticity or content." "Oh, you'll see them, Director," Crockett replied. "But first, I'd like to establish a few facts." She turned to another committee member. "Congressman Davis, your office also received information from whistleblowers regarding these operations, isn't that correct?" Davis, a senior congressman known for his careful approach, nodded gravely. "That's correct. 3 separate FBI employees came forward with consistent accounts suggesting that certain surveillance programs were being run off books." Patel's composure began to crack. "With all due respect, Congressman, unsubstantiated claims from disgruntled employees don't constitute evidence of—" "Let me finish, Director," Crockett interrupted, her voice sharp. "These weren't just claims. The whistleblowers provided internal memos with your signature authorizing these operations." She pulled out a document from her folder and held it up, like this one, dated January 4th, 2023, authorizing electronic surveillance of American citizens without FISA court approval. Photographers' cameras clicked rapidly as they captured Patel's reaction, a momentary widening of the eyes that betrayed his shock at seeing the document. "That appears to be an internal draft that was never implemented," he countered, regaining his composure. "Drafts are often prepared exploring various options, but that doesn't mean—" "Director Patel," Crockett cut in again, "we both know the difference between a draft and an executed order. This document has your signature, a date stamp, and execution protocols. It was implemented." The committee chairman, sensing the gravity of the situation, intervened. "Congresswoman Crockett, these are serious accusations. Does the minority have access to these documents?" "Mr. Chairman, I provided copies to all committee members this morning," she replied, gesturing to packets being distributed by staffers. "I wanted everyone to see the evidence simultaneously to ensure there could be no accusations of partisan handling of this information." As committee members began flipping through the packets, the room grew tense. One congressman audibly gasped. Another removed his glasses in disbelief. Patel team huddled behind him, urgently whispering in his ear. His face had grown increasingly strained, the confident demeanor now replaced by visible concern. "Mr. Chairman," Patel said, his voice now tighter, "I request a brief recess to review these materials before continuing. This is the first time I am seeing these documents, and I should have the opportunity to verify their authenticity." "Director, before we consider a recess," Crockett pressed on, "I want to ask about Operation Showdown." The name hung in the air like a thunderclap. Patel froze. The color drained from his face. "I don't know what you're referring to," he said, but his body language told a different story. "Operation Showdown," Crockett repeated, producing another document. "A covert surveillance program targeting over 300 American journalists, activists, and elected officials that began in April 2023, a program that was never disclosed to this committee or approved by any court." The room erupted. Journalists frantically typed on their phones. Committee members exchanged shocked glances. "Order!" the chairman shouted, banging his gavel. "We will have order!" As the room quieted, Crockett continued, her voice now quiet but firm. "Director Patel, we have testimony from 4 separate FBI employees who worked on Showdown. We have internal memos detailing the targets, the methods, and the explicit instructions to keep the program hidden from congressional oversight." She slid a document across the table toward Patel. "This memo, which bears your signature, specifically directs that, under no circumstances, should Operation Showdown be disclosed to congressional oversight committees or included in standard FISA reporting." "See, Nigel," Patel stared at the document, visibly shaken. His legal counsel whispered urgently in his ear. "Mr. Chairman," the FBI's counsel interjected, standing up, "these documents appear to contain classified information. We request they be handled in a closed session." "Nice try," Crockett responded, "but these documents aren't properly classified. They're marked classified to hide misconduct, which is itself illegal. The Classification Act specifically prohibits using classification to conceal violations of law or prevent embarrassment to agencies or officials. The chairman studied the documents for a moment. The committee believes Congresswoman Crockett is correct. These documents appear to reveal potential violations of law and were improperly classified. We will proceed in open session. Patel's demeanor had completely transformed. The confident, composed FBI director was now visibly sweating, his eyes darting between the documents, his legal team, and the exit doors. Director, Crockett continued, we haven't even gotten to the most disturbing part yet. She produced a final document. This is a list of surveillance targets from Operation Showdown. It includes 42 members of Congress, 78 journalists, and over 200 American citizens whose only apparent crime was criticizing administration policies on social media. Gasps filled the room. Even members of Patel's own party looked stunned. And most concerning of all, Crockett said, her voice now rising with controlled anger, the information gathered from this illegal surveillance was shared with private entities outside government. Specifically, 3 major campaign operations and 2 political action committees. The room exploded into chaos. The chairman hammered his gavel repeatedly, struggling to restore order. We will take a 30-minute recess, he finally shouted over the din. And when we return, Director Patel, you will answer for these documents. As the committee members filed out, reporters rushed to file their stories. In the confusion, no one noticed a young FBI agent quietly slip out a side door, a determined expression on his face. The confrontation had just begun, and the worst was yet to come. When the hearing reconvened after the recess, the tension in the room was electric. Every seat in the public gallery was filled. News networks had interrupted regular programming for live coverage. Outside, crowds had gathered around smartphone screens streaming the proceedings. Director Patel returned with an expanded team, now including 2 senior Justice Department officials and additional legal counsel. Their hurried whispers and grim expressions told their own story. The committee will come to order, the chairman announced, his voice grave. Director Patel, are you prepared to respond to the documents and allegations presented by Congresswoman Crockett? Patel leaned forward to the microphone. Mr. Chairman, after reviewing the materials during the recess, I must begin by saying that some of these documents appear to be authentic FBI records, while others show signs of manipulation or alteration. I categorically deny authorizing any surveillance program that circumvented legal requirements or congressional oversight. Crockett smiled slightly, the kind of smile that suggested she had anticipated this exact response. Director, I thought you might say that, she said, calmly, which is why I didn't present all our evidence before the recess. She nodded to her aide, who distributed new packets to committee members. What the committee now has before them are sworn affidavits from 6 FBI employees who worked directly on Operation Showdown. These individuals have provided detailed accounts of how the program operated, who authorized it, that would be you, Director, and how the collected information was used. She pulled out a small USB drive. More importantly, we have this. A database containing the actual surveillance records from Showdown, showing exactly who was targeted, what information was collected, and where it was sent. Patel's lawyer leaned over, urgently whispering in his ear. Patel's face had turned ashen. Additionally, Crockett continued, we have secured testimony from Thomas Reynolds. At the mention of this name, Patel visibly flinched. For those not familiar with Mr. Reynolds, Crockett explained to the committee, he was Director Patel's chief of staff until 3 months ago when he abruptly resigned for personal reasons. Mr. Reynolds has provided us with extensive documentation, including emails, meeting notes, and recorded conversations directly linking Director Patel not only to the authorization of Operation Showdown, but to explicit directions to conceal it from this committee. He told us afterward that after multiple delays, Crockett took steps to conceal it from this committee. Crockett turned to face Patel directly. Director, Mr. Reynolds is waiting in a secure location with his attorney, prepared to testify today. Would you like to revise your statement before we call him? The room fell completely silent. Even the journalists stopped typing, all eyes fixed on Patel. For nearly 30 seconds, an eternity in such a setting, Patel said nothing. He conferred with his legal team, their whispers growing increasingly heated. Finally, he turned back to the microphone. Chairman, I request a brief private consultation with the committee leadership and the Department of Justice representatives. Denied, the chairman responded firmly. These proceedings will remain public. Director Patel, I will ask you directly, did you authorize Operation Showdown? Patel's hands trembled slightly as he reached for his water glass. Mr. Chairman, the operational details of certain sensitive FBI programs are— Yes or no, Director? The chairman insisted. Did you authorize this program? Another long pause. Then, barely audible, Yes. The admission sent shockwaves through the room. But Crockett wasn't finished. And did you explicitly direct that this program be concealed from congressional oversight? Patel looked toward the Justice Department officials who offered no help. Patel believed the program's sensitivity required compartmentalization. That's not what I asked, Director, Crockett pressed. Did you direct your staff to hide this program from Congress, yes or no? Under certain circumstances, notification requirements can be modified when— Director Patel, Crockett interrupted, her voice now steel. I have here an email from you to your deputy directors, dated June 12, 2023. I quote, Under no circumstances is Showdown to be included in congressional briefings. If asked directly, default to standard denials. She held up the printout. Is this your email, Director? The room held its breath. Yes, Patel finally admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. Crockett nodded to her aide, who displayed a slide on the large screen. This is a list of individuals targeted by Showdown. Director Patel, can you explain why members of Congress from both parties are on this list? Or why journalists who published stories critical of FBI operations were targeted? Or why private citizens with no criminal records were placed under surveillance simply for organizing peaceful protests? Patel's legal counsel finally intervened. Mr. Chairman, my client cannot answer questions about specific targets without proper context and security considerations. Actually, Crockett countered, pulling out another document, we have the full targeting justification memos right here. For example, Congressman Wilkins was placed under surveillance after he criticized the Bureau's budget requests. The justification memo specifically notes his problematic oversight posture as the reason for inclusion. She turned to a Republican member of the committee. Congressman Hayes, you're also on this list. The memo authorizing your surveillance cites your excessive inquiries into ongoing FBI operations. Hayes looked stunned. Are you saying I was spied on for doing my job? That's exactly what I'm saying, Crockett confirmed. And it wasn't just members of Congress. She flipped through more documents. Journalists were targeted for writing articles questioning FBI tactics. Civil rights attorneys were surveilled after filing lawsuits against the Bureau. Ordinary citizens were monitored for organizing peaceful demonstrations outside FBI offices. With each example, Patel seemed to shrink in his chair. His team looked increasingly desperate, passing notes and whispering urgently. But the most disturbing aspect, Crockett continued, is what happened to the collected information. She held up another document. According to internal logs, surveillance data on political figures and activists was regularly transmitted to non-government email servers registered to political action committees and campaign operations. A Justice Department official finally stood up. Mr. Chairman, I must interject. If these allegations are true, they describe potential criminal conduct. Director Patel should be advised of his rights before answering further questions. The chairman nodded gravely. Director Patel, you are not compelled to continue answering if you believe your responses might incriminate you. Do you wish to invoke your Fifth Amendment rights? The room fell silent again. The FBI Director, America's top law enforcement officer, faced an unthinkable choice: continue a crumbling defense or invoke the right against self-incrimination. After consulting with his attorneys, Patel leaned forward. Mr. Chairman, on advice of counsel, I must respectfully decline to answer further questions on the grounds that my answers might tend to incriminate me. The admission sent the hearing room into chaos. Reporters rushed for the doors to break the story. Committee members exchanged shocked glances. Photographers captured the historic moment, the FBI director essentially admitting to potential criminal conduct. As the chairman struggled to restore order, Crockett remained focused on Patel. For the record, Director, we have only shown you a fraction of the evidence we've gathered, and Thomas Reynolds has provided us with recordings of your direct orders regarding Showdown. We have testimony from the FBI technicians who set up the data transfers to private political organizations. We have the complete target lists, surveillance logs, and internal communications about the program. She leaned forward, her voice quiet but carrying through the microphone. We have everything, Director. Every email, every memo, every recording. The truth is finally going to come out. In that moment, it was clear to everyone in the room and to millions watching on television that Patel's career was over. But the implications extended far beyond one man's downfall. This was a seismic event that would shake the foundations of the FBI and raise profound questions about who was watching the watchers. The chairman banged his gavel repeatedly. This hearing is now adjourned. The committee will reconvene tomorrow at 9 a.m. Director Patel, you are instructed to return with proper counsel. This committee expects full cooperation with what has now become an impeachment inquiry. As security officers moved to escort Patel from the hearing room, Crockett gathered her documents calmly, the composed demeanor of someone who had done exactly what she had set out to do, expose the truth, no matter how powerful those who sought to hide it. Within hours of Director Patel's devastating testimony, Washington erupted into a political firestorm unlike anything seen in decades. Patelgate and ShadowNet scandal dominated social media, news tickers scrolled non-stop updates, and political figures from both parties scrambled to respond to the revelations. Outside FBI headquarters, protesters gathered with hastily made signs demanding accountability and reform. Who's watching the watchers? Read one. No one is above the law, declared another. The crowd grew by the hour as more details of Operation ShadowNet leaked to the press. In the White House, emergency meetings were underway. The president's press secretary emerged briefly to read a terse statement. The allegations against Director Patel are deeply troubling. If proven true, they represent an unacceptable breach of the public trust. The president has directed the Attorney General to appoint a special counsel to investigate this matter fully and independently. Behind closed doors, however, panic had set in. White House staffers were reportedly reviewing all communications with Patel, while lawyers prepared for the inevitable congressional subpoenas. The question on everyone's mind: how high did knowledge of ShadowNet go? At the Justice Department, the Attorney General called an emergency press conference. Standing before a forest of microphones, she announced, "This morning, I accepted the resignation of FBI Director Raj Patel, effective immediately. I have appointed Deputy Director Rebecca Chen as acting director pending further investigation. Additionally, I have named former Supreme Court Justice William Morgan as special counsel to oversee the investigation into these disturbing allegations." When asked if Patel might face criminal charges, she responded carefully, "The special counsel will follow the evidence wherever it leads. No one is above the law." Back in Congress, Congresswoman Crockett found herself suddenly thrust into the national spotlight. As she walked through the Capitol, staffers applauded spontaneously. Colleagues who had dismissed her concerns weeks earlier now approached with congratulations and offers of support. At an impromptu press conference on the Capitol steps, Crockett maintained her characteristic focus. "This investigation was never about one person or one party," she told the assembled reporters. "It was about a fundamental principle. In America, law enforcement agencies must operate within the law. They cannot spy on Americans without proper legal authority. They cannot target people for their political beliefs or their criticism of government agencies. And they certainly cannot share surveillance data with political campaigns." A reporter shouted a question. "Congresswoman, how did you get these documents when so many others missed them?" Crockett smiled slightly. "I listened to the whistleblowers when others wouldn't. These brave FBI employees risked everything because they believed in their oath to the Constitution, not to any individual. Thomas Reynolds, in particular, showed extraordinary courage in coming forward with evidence despite tremendous pressure to stay silent." As if on cue, Reynolds himself appeared at the edge of the crowd, flanked by his attorneys. The former FBI chief of staff looked exhausted but determined as he approached the microphones. "For months, I tried to work within the system to stop these illegal programs," he explained, his voice steady despite the pressure of the moment. "I raised concerns with Director Patel directly. I consulted with Justice Department ethics officials. I even attempted to provide anonymous tips to oversight committees. But the surveillance continued, and the targets expanded." He paused, emotion briefly overcoming him. When I discovered that the collected data was being shared with political organizations, I knew I could no longer remain silent, no matter the personal cost. Across town, in a secure FBI facility, Acting Director Chen was addressing senior bureau leadership. "Today is perhaps the darkest day in FBI history," she began, her voice grave. "The trust between the American people and their premier law enforcement agency has been severely damaged. Restoring that trust must be our absolute priority." She looked around the room, meeting the eyes of each division chief. "I want a full accounting of everyone involved in Operation Showdown. I want to know how it started, who approved it, and how it continued without triggering internal safeguards. Any agent or official who participated in illegal surveillance or the improper sharing of information will be held accountable." One assistant director raised his hand. "Ma'am, what about ongoing operations? Should we expect additional congressional scrutiny?" Chen nodded grimly. "We should expect the most intense congressional oversight in Bureau history. And frankly, we've earned it. Starting tomorrow, I want a complete review of all surveillance programs. If any other operations skirt legal boundaries, I want to know now, not in another congressional hearing." Meanwhile, in newsrooms across the country, journalists were digging deeper into the Showdown revelations. At the Washington Post, editors gathered around a conference table reviewing a list of surveillance targets that had been leaked online. "There are 37 journalists on this list, including 3 from our own paper," the executive editor noted, his face grim. "All of them worked on stories critical of FBI operations or published pieces questioning the Bureau's expanding domestic surveillance authorities." A national security reporter nodded. "According to my sources, this goes beyond just monitoring. The surveillance included hacking email accounts, accessing cloud storage, and even activating microphones on personal devices. It's the kind of operation typically reserved for foreign intelligence targets or terrorism suspects, not journalists and members of Congress." The political implications were spreading like wildfire. In the Senate, the majority leader announced plans for comprehensive hearings on FBI oversight. "The American people deserve to know if other intelligence or law enforcement agencies are conducting similar unauthorized surveillance," she declared from the Senate floor. Meanwhile, candidates in the upcoming election scrambled to distance themselves from the scandal. Campaign officials frantically reviewed donor records, searching for any connections to the political action committees implicated in receiving surveillance data. By evening, the scandal had expanded beyond Patel himself. Thomas Reynolds had provided investigators with emails suggesting that senior Justice Department officials had been briefed on aspects of Showdown. 2 deputy attorneys general announced their resignations to spend more time with family, the Washington euphemism for departing under a cloud. At tech companies whose platforms had been compromised to enable the surveillance, emergency security meetings were underway. "If they could do this without court orders, our encryption protocols have serious vulnerabilities," a senior engineer at one major messaging platform warned. "We need to completely rebuild our security architecture." Civil liberties organizations announced plans to file class accession lawsuits on behalf of surveilled Americans. "This represents the most egregious domestic spying operation since COINTELPRO," the ACLU director stated in a press release. "Every American should be asking if they would spy on members of Congress and journalists, who else were they watching?" As night fell on Washington, Congresswoman Crockett finally returned to her office, exhausted but resolved. Her phone had not stopped ringing, calls from constituents, colleagues, and journalists seeking more information. Her email inbox had crashed from the volume of incoming messages. Her chief of staff handed her a cup of coffee. "The whistleblowers are all in secure locations," he reported. "Reynolds is cooperating fully with the special counsel, and the committee chairman has authorized expanded hearings starting next week." Crockett nodded, taking a moment to absorb the magnitude of what had happened. "This is just the beginning," she said quietly. Patel didn't create Showdown in a vacuum. There were others involved, possibly at the highest levels of government. "We need to follow the evidence wherever it leads." As she reviewed the next day's hearing schedule, a breaking news alert flashed on the television in her office. The Justice Department had just announced that FBI agents had executed search warrants at 3 locations connected to political organizations that allegedly received Showdown data. The investigation was expanding by the hour. In his Georgetown townhouse, Raj Patel sat alone in his study, surrounded by legal pads and the business cards of criminal defense attorneys. His phone, once constantly buzzing with calls from Washington power players, was now silent. The man who had once commanded the nation's premier law enforcement agency was now facing the prospect of becoming the target of a criminal investigation. On his desk sat a subpoena for all personal communications related to Operation Showdown, and a notice that his security clearances had been suspended. The fall had been swift and complete. As Americans across the country watched the late news recounting the day's shocking developments, they grappled with difficult questions. How could such extensive illegal surveillance happen in a country with supposed checks and balances? Who else knew about these programs? And perhaps most importantly, what other secrets remained hidden? For Congresswoman Sarah Crockett, vindication was bittersweet. She had exposed a grave threat to democratic governance, but the revelations had shaken Americans' faith in their institutions. The road to rebuilding trust would be long and difficult. Democracy depends on transparency and accountability, she told a reporter in her final interview of the day. What happened here was a betrayal of both. But the fact that we're having this conversation, that the truth has come out despite powerful efforts to conceal it, that gives me hope. It means the system, however imperfectly, still works. As the camera lights dimmed and the reporter departed, Crockett turned back to the documents on her desk. Tomorrow would bring new hearings, new revelations, and new challenges. The work of oversight never ended, especially now. In newsrooms, congressional offices, and living rooms across America, the questions continued to multiply. How deep did the corruption go? Who would be implicated next? And what other secrets might still be hidden in the shadowy corners of America's most powerful institutions? The showdown scandal was just beginning to unfold, with reverberations that would be felt for years to come. One thing was certain: American politics would never be quite the same again. If you found this inside look at Washington power struggles enlightening, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel. We'll be following the Patel showdown scandal as it continues to develop, bringing you all the latest developments and expert analysis. Hit that notification bell so you never miss an update on this unfolding story that's reshaping American politics before our eyes.